Hi, this is Michael Talis with the Talis team, and today I'm sitting down with Leonard Spoto. He's owner of Asset Exchange Company, and they're involved in 1031 exchange. You can see his background already. So, Leonard, tell us about yourself and about your company.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks, Michael, for having me. It's a pleasure, and it's always a pleasure to chat with you. So we are a 1031 exchange company. So we're not a real estate agent. We don't buy and sell real estate. We are not an escrow company. We don't do title insurance. We are a unique company in the 1031 exchange space that we focus exclusively on 1031 exchanges. So I've been doing this for a very long time. Got into the 1031 exchange business around 2002, and then started
Oh,
this
wow.
company. Yeah. So it's been a while now.
Congratulations, 20 years.
Yeah. I've been doing this for a while, but started Asset Exchange Company in 2006 with my business partner Adam Skarsgård, who is a tax attorney.
Oh, got it. So we're using this term 1031 exchange. So tell us about what it is and what's the role of 1031 exchange companies in the whole process.
Yeah, good question. So a 1031 exchange is just a provision within the tax code that allows an owner of an investment or a business use property to sell that property and defer capital gains taxes, provided they go out and exchange into another investment property.
Oh, got it.
So it's just a mechanism for tax deferral on the sale of your investment or business property.
Got it. And what's the role of your company specifically? Because my understanding is similar to like 401k plan. If you touch the money, you lose all the ability to save on taxes. So tell us about what your company is actually doing in that process.
Yeah, and that's a great analogy, Michael. I often use that when talking to clients. We are a custodian. So when you do a 1031 exchange, the government requires that you work with a custodian to hold the funds, to make sure that you are in compliance with all the rules and regulations set forth in the tax code, and then also to prepare all the legal documents and the paperwork that properly documents the transaction as a 1031 exchange. So the biggest thing that we do is hold the funds. Obviously, when you do an exchange, you cannot touch the funds, as you mentioned. So we're going to hold funds and then release funds when our clients get into contract to buy the replacement property. So typically what will happen is a client will get in contract to sell their property, they'll open up escrow, and then they will usually within the first week of escrow get in touch with us because their realtor advises them, hey, get in touch with Leonard to make sure that your account is set up so that you don't have any problems with the IRS. And then what we will do is we will provide instructions to escrow that the client's doing a 1031 exchange. The escrow company will wire the funds to the exchange account at the close of escrow, and then the funds sit there until replacement property is acquired, and then at that point we release the funds.
Got it. So what kind of properties are eligible for a 1031 exchange?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of people think, and there is some confusion when doing a 1031 exchange, because the government states that properties involved in an exchange have to be like kind. So often we'll have clients ask, well, geez, if I sold a 2-unit building, do I have to buy another 2-unit building? And the answer to that is no. Although there is a provision that the properties involved in an exchange are like kind, as long as they are investment or business use properties, that will qualify, right? So you could sell your single family rental home and you could buy an apartment building. You could sell an apartment building. You could buy an office building. You have a lot of flexibility.
So are there any other kinds of assets that are eligible except like real properties?
Yeah, good question. So there is really no alternative to real property. When you do an exchange, you have to buy real estate. Now, the industry did create an alternative to traditional real estate, though. So when you think of traditional real estate, you think of a building that you own on your own. Right. There is an alternative to going out and buying real estate on your own. You can invest in a passive real estate investment deal. The government back in 2004 blessed the structure of what's called a Delaware Statutory Trust. And so With a Delaware statutory trust, institutional real estate companies will go out and buy like a $50 million apartment building,
Mhm.
and then they will sell you a beneficial interest in the trust. So
It's
that
like
you
like a
own.
share,
Yeah,
like a
it's
company
very
share.
similar to a share, although you are actually an owner of the real estate. And so that is the only kind of non-traditional asset that you can invest in when you do a 1031 exchange.
Got it. Got it. So, tell us what why it's so important to understand the rules, because yeah, my understanding is if you do something wrong, it's irreversible. But I want to hear your take on that.
Yeah, it's really important to understand the rules because there's a lot of money at risk, right? So when you do a 1031 exchange, you're deferring taxes. And if you don't follow the rules and regulation and you get audited, the government's going to disqualify your exchange and make you pay taxes, possibly impose penalties, interest, and fines as well.
On top of that.
On top of that, exactly. And the good news is not a lot of our clients get audited, but you don't want to be that one that does get audited and has a problem, right? So it's always best to follow rules to make sure that if you do get audited, you have a bulletproof exchange that the IRS looks at it and then goes away.
Got it. So going back to the types of properties, your primary residence, is there any scenario that we can kind of apply the same rules? Here in California, with the growth of real estate values, a lot of people who owned homes for, let's say, 5 years or more, they're already facing capital gain taxes if they're just selling their primary residence. And that's specifically important in the Bay Area where, well, our median home sale price right now is, well, if you look at Santa Clara County, is around like 1.6 million, and the growth over the last 10 years was close to 180% in the values. So is it possible to apply 1031 exchange in some way to your primary residence?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what you're alluding to is what we refer to is you have gains in excess of your homeowner's exemption. So that's a problem, right?
That's a good term. I never heard it before.
Yeah. So what happens is you live in a house for 20 years and you do have the homeowner's exemption if you sell the property, right? And the homeowner's exemption will allow a married couple to avoid paying taxes on the first $500,000 of gain. The problem is in the Bay Area, you might have gains in excess of that $500,000 exemption. So if you sell your home, you can be faced with a pretty big tax bill. Luckily, there is a strategy to incorporate the 1031 exchange, but it does require that you move out of that primary residence. You establish the property as an investment by renting it out for at least 2 years. And then when you go to sell that property, because it's been rented for the last 2 years, it will qualify for 1031 exchange. So you can convert your primary residence into a rental and then
it's
sell
like
that
converting
property.
it into an investment property.
You convert it to an investment property. Now, the good thing about it, though, is you can actually double dip, Michael. You can do the 1031 exchange because it's been rented for 2 years, but because you've also lived in it for 2 of the last 5 years, you can take the homeowner's exemption as well.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. I never thought about it.
Yeah, it's a fantastic strategy. I mean, I've worked with clients who have faced, $3 million in gain on the sale of a property in Burlingame or Palo Alto. And
it's a good problem.
Yeah, it's a great problem, but it is a big tax bill, right? So if you move out and you can convert that property into a rental, you can do the 1031 exchange and take the homeowner's exemption and eliminate your tax bill entirely.
Got it. Well, just from the way I understand the tax code, if you're paying capital gains, it's federal capital gain tax plus California, and it together comes to about 1/3, like about 30%. Is it right? Or
Yep, you hit the nail on the head. So we always tell clients to estimate about 33% as their tax rate.
Got it. So, and when you are you found a replacement property and you eventually want to convert it into your primary residence, how is that process potentially may work?
Yeah, so great question. A lot of our clients will ask, in a 1031 exchange, can I buy a primary residence? And the answer is no. However, if you're strategic about what you do, you might be able to convert an investment property eventually into a primary residence, right? So when you do a 1031 exchange, you're selling an investment property or a business use property, and you have to buy another investment or business use property. But after you buy the property, if you season it on your taxes for 2 years as an investment, you can then stop renting that property out, kick the tenants out, and move into the property yourself. So
Got it.
initially, you're not allowed to buy a primary residence in a 1031 exchange, but if you're strategic about it, there's a way to eventually get into the property as your primary.
Right. Or I don't know, kick the tenants out and give it to your kids or something like that.
Yeah, people do that. The real important thing for the exchange is those first 2 years of ownership need to be investment or business use. After that, you're good to do what you want.
Got it. And tell us about the timelines. Are there this process, my understanding, has a pretty strict timeline in terms of how fast you need to find the replacement property. And also if you can talk about reverse 1031 exchange.
Yeah, so let's go over the timelines first. And that's kind of the most challenging and difficult part of the exchange process, especially right now when inventory is really tight. So when you do an exchange, the typical way that you do an exchange, or the most common way to do an exchange, is to sell a property first. So you sell a property.
Right.
When you close escrow, your time frame for your exchange starts. The government gives you 180 days to go out and buy replacement property. All right, so you got about 6 months to buy your replacement property or properties. However, within that time frame, you have to identify in writing what you're thinking about buying on day 45. So although the government gives you that 180-day window to go out and acquire replacement property, really you need to know what you're going to buy a lot sooner than that, because the identification is due on day 45.
So, and you, so should you identify just, I don't know, 1, 2, or 3, like, can you identify a number of them and just buy just one of them?
Yeah, good question. So unfortunately, you can't just go out and print out a list of everything on the MLS on day 45 and say, okay, I'll buy something on this list. The government makes it a little bit trickier than that. The government gives you 2 options effectively for identifying your properties on day 45. It has to be done in writing. So what we'll do is we will provide our clients with an identification letter that they'll fill out. And when they fill out that letter, they're going to fill it out according to either what's called the 3 property rule, where they can nominate 3 properties of any value, or they can choose what's called the 200% rule. And the 200% rule does not limit the number of properties that you can put on your letter. It limits the value.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So you can go out to Texas and you can put 20 different properties on your letter. But
the price of one here in California.
Yeah, right. And what happens though is if you wanted to put more than 3 properties on your letter, you're constrained to the value of all those properties that you've identified not exceeding 200% of what you sold.
Got it. And basically at the end, you need to close not on all of them, but on some portion, right?
Yeah, you need to close on enough real estate to complete your exchange. And whenever you do an exchange, you have to replace the value of what you sold to defer all the taxes. So if you sold for $1 million, you want to buy at least $1 million of replacement property to defer all your taxes.
Got it. And what about the reverse timeline, reverse exchange timeline?
Yeah, reverse exchanges are tricky. So we don't do a lot of them, but we do get a lot of questions about them, because in a reverse exchange, in theory, you can buy the replacement property first, and then you have 180 days to get your property sold. And if your property sells within that 180-day time frame, it's going to be a tax-deferred sale. Now, the problem with the reverse exchange, Michael, and the reason why we don't do a lot of them, is the government makes it really tricky. You can't own the new property and the old property at the same time, all right? And the exchange is going from one to another. So what we do to facilitate reverse exchanges is my company will buy the replacement property for you. So we actually go on title to the new property, and we will sell it to you once your property sells.
Well, it just reverse exchange seems safer with the shortage of inventory because
Yeah,
it's easier to sell than to buy these days.
Absolutely, and that's why we get a lot of questions about them. The problem is when we buy the new property in a reverse exchange, we don't use our money. So you have to have the money, and then B, if you need a loan to do the reverse exchange, most
Right.
lenders don't loan on reverse exchanges in today's market because they want to lend you money and they want you to go on title, right?
Got
So
it.
if we're
So
going
it's
on
hard
title,
money. It's like hard money lenders, right?
yeah, most of the reverse exchange financing is done by hard money lenders at, a much more expensive rate and lots of points and things like that.
So these guys don't trust you to be the owner.
They don't.
Well, yeah, that's probably most of the stuff that we wanted to discuss, at least today. But if the values of the properties are not exactly the same, my understanding is that there is still a workaround. So
Well,
if you're buying something that is a little more expensive, it's very hard to sell something for exactly $1 million and buy another home for exactly $1 million.
yeah, and that's not a problem, right? So if you're doing exchange, you can always go up in value. So if you don't want to pay taxes, we always tell clients make sure you're purchasing equal or greater in value. Now, the only time you're going to have a problem or a tax liability is if you purchase less real estate. So if you sell for $1 million and you end up buying for $950, it doesn't disqualify the entire transaction, but that difference of $50,000 is going to be taxable.
Got it. Well, I can imagine that some people may want to cash out at least part of it, kind of a scenario.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we call the cash out, we call it boot in our industry. So you might hear that phrase, you might take some boot, and that's fine. If you want to take some cash out, you're going to want to let your escrow company know. They will cut you a check for the amount you want, and then the rest comes over to the 1031 exchange account.
And you guys can help with the kind of understanding the tax implications of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because if full amount versus partial, it's getting tricky.
Yeah.
So the last question I wanted to ask, so what would be the best way to get hold of you and contact you? I will also put the information down in the description, but
yeah, I think the easiest way is to call our toll-free number, which I've got here behind me. We also can be reached online. Our website is www.ax1031.com. But really the best way is just to pick up the phone and give us a call. We do consultations with clients and agents all the time.
Got it. Well, thank you, Leonard. It was a pleasure talking to you. And I hope we'll have another chance to work together.
Yeah, absolutely.